All right, folks, Mark here again, cooking books and bringing information. I want to talk to you guys real quick about something called selective pressures. Selective pressures is very, very interesting. And I wouldn't say it's scary, but it just put a whole new perspective on life. At least for me, it does. It puts a lot of things in perspective. And selective pressures is well, what it is, it's one of the instruments of evolution, right? Selective pressures leads to what's called no, not natural selection. So yes, I'm sorry. Yes, selective pressures drive natural selection, and natural selection drives evolution. So let's say that again. Selective pressures drive natural selection, and natural selection drives evolution. So selective pressure is a mechanism, it's a tool of evolution, just like natural selection is also a tool or a mechanism used by evolution. And what selective pressure is, it's very interesting because it's a two-part. It has a two-part definition or two-part meaning. And the first part is biotic, right? B-I-O-T-I-C. And then there's abiotic. And biotic means organisms that act upon other organisms and alter their behavior and also their ability to reproduce. Right, alters their behavior, their survival rates or ratio, and their ability to reproduce. I'll say that one more time. Selective pressures have a two-part definition. One part is biotic. Biotic are other organisms that's in an environment that affect the or alters or impacts the behavior, the survival rate, and the reproductive rate of another organism. So an example of that would be a prey-predator dynamic. The predator impacts and alters and affects the behavior of the prey, and also will limit its ability to survive and also reproduce. Prey-predator dynamic or predator-prey dynamic. That's an example of biotic selective pressure. Then there's abiotic selective pressure. Abiotic selective pressure means non-living factors in that same environment. I'll say it again, non-living factors or forces in said environment that affects an organism's ability to survive or to reproduce. Right, to survive and to reproduce. So it's non-living factors in an environment that affects an organism's ability to survive and to reproduce, right? And it affects it adversely. An example of abiotic would be temperature, right? So weather can affect an organism or a species' ability to survive and to reproduce, right? And weather, I'm just being very general. Fill in the blank, right? A tornado, a hurricane, a tsunami, a flood, whatever. Any kind of weather can have an adverse effect on an organism's ability to survive and therefore reproduce. And that will be considered abiotic, an abiotic selective pressure. And I just gave you the definition of a biotic selective pressure. Now, what I want to look at is the biotic selective pressure, because biotic means one organism, again, acting or impacting or altering the behavior and survival ratio of another organism. So how does that apply to us humans? Policies that are put in place have a adverse effect on us as a species or on us as an organism, and these policies are instituted by other organisms, other humans. So we put policies in place that affect other humans adversely, and it will alter and it will determine whether they're able to survive and to reproduce, right? Because you have policies that will cut programs for dilapidated neighborhoods. So a neighborhood that's already dilapidated, these policies that take away funds from these neighborhoods, whether it be through education or some kind of, program for, food drop for food or whatever resources, whatever the resources may be. So they cut funding for some resources in some dilapidated neighborhoods, and the adverse effect is that crime will go up, because where there's a lack of resource, there's been studies that show lack of resources, areas with that lack resources tend to have higher crime rates and robberies and murders and homicides and so on and so forth. So the ratio of another person producing a child, an offspring, is cut drastically by this policy that's been implemented or put into place. And this is a example of selective pressures that are considered biotic, because it's not natural. It's not a natural occurrence in the weather or nature. It's man implementing a policy that affects his fellow man in an adverse way. And that's the definition of selective pressures. So I guess the purpose of this video is to ask the question, selective pressures, are they good or bad? The end result for selective pressure is to balance, is to control population spurs or population growth or overpopulation. When you study evolution, selective pressure and natural selection are both instruments of the control and mitigation or reduction of population spurts. And the reason for that is because, for instance, let's look at cats, right? When a cat have offspring, they have what's called a litter. Research shows that organisms tend to produce more offspring than the ecology or the ecosystem can support. So evolution uses natural selection, it uses selective pressures to curb the population growth spurts, so that there's a balance between the ecosystem, which is all of the environment and its resources, and the organisms that are occupying that environment, the set environment. So evolution, natural selection, all these different mechanisms are there to keep things in check or to balance the population out. So I guess the question is, what do you think, right? Leave comments if you like, hit a like, share, whatever. Peace.